the distinct pleasure of introducing first our president, Dr. and Captain Shanmugam Murthy. Shan, you have the floor. All right?
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I take great pleasure in introducing the presenters for today. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us. First is Ritu Mathur. She's a learning and development professional with over 22 years of experience, having expertise in defining and driving learning strategies and intervention for organizations and individuals. Ritu's areas of expertise include competency and role-based organizational development intervention, conducting, designing, and implementing 360 degrees feedback process, assessment, and development centers. Executive coaching as well, with management development and behavioral training programs. She's currently the International Association of Coaching Bangalore chapter leader and a member of the IAC licensee committee. Thank you, Ritu, for coming in today.
Thank you.
Next, Saraf. Saraf Mohanty, an interesting friend. He's a leadership coach and a management consultant with more than 27 years of working experience, of which 9 years have been in sales, marketing, and L&D teams of blue chip multinational corporation. Saraf specializes in grooming leaders for tomorrow. His blended learning model has been a huge success with many of his corporate clients, some of whom have retained him over 17 years now. And he has shared a lot of case studies with me. He's a wonderful leadership trainer. He has expertise in organizational development intervention, assessment, executive coaching, and skill enhancement initiatives. Not many of you know this. Saraf can also facilitate a drum circle. So if you, anyone of you, and especially in Bangalore, if you got a team building or any event going on, invite him. He can facilitate a drum circle for you. And he's an active member of the IAC Bangalore chapter. The next, Dr. G. Rajkumar. I had the honor of and pleasure meeting him and his team in Hyderabad. I think it was last year. Great team, creating a difference in organization, individuals and organization. Dr. Raj comes with diverse experience of over 33 years spanning across academics, corporate, and consulting. Presently, he acts as a human resource advisor to organizations, especially growing mid-sized ones, leadership facilitator, and executive coach. His areas of deep interest include driving business growth through people power and unleashing the leadership potential in people. He's a PhD in operations research and a certified leadership grid facilitator and appreciative coach. And I also know that all three, Ritu, Saraf, and Rajkumar, were colleagues at one time. And the future, I think Dr. Raj, I think he'll be starting the IAC Hyderabad chapter soon, Dr. Raj. And
Sure.
today's theme is performance coaching for leaders, and the discussion will focus on the role of assessments, coaching, and performance of leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, coaches, wherever you are, let's hear it from them. Over to you, team.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much,
Shan.
Shan. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shan, and thank you so much for making us feel so good. I know when someone else introduces us, I think we feel much better than knowing about ourselves, right? Yeah. So I mean, we just live that moment of glory. Thank you so much for those kind words and great introductions. And in fact, it was such a pleasure to have you and Grace with us during that moment. And I must thank Ritu for making that happen. I really look forward for greater association with International Association of Coaching. And thanks so much for Louis and Anjali for having us a part of this webinar series. Amazing topic, very timely, coaching with hope through chaos. I think pandemic or no pandemic, and chaos seems to be part of our world in general. So that's something that we always keep facing. So greetings to all those who are listening to us or who are going to listen to us in the future as well. What we thought is we had a few interesting dialogues among three of us because, as Shan mentioned rightly, you have brought us together after exactly 20 years. way back in 2000 or 2001, we three were part of one team. And now I think after that, this is the first time ever that we three of us are on the same platform. Though, of course, we pursue different, the projects independently, sometimes collaboratively, but this is the first time. Thanks so much for that. And the moment we were signed up for this webinar, we had a round of discussions about how do we really plan this evening. And then we thought, let's go with a shared facilitation model. So we're going to be sharing the facilitation of this session, and we want to keep it more conversational this evening. And as a part of that, I will be channeling the conversation on some of the key aspects that we wanted to share this evening. And Ritu will be closely tracking any points, any questions, any views from the audience and bringing that into the conversation. And I would then request Saurav to do the honors of summing up and drawing the key insights from this conversation. So that's how we plan the discussion. So now let me get started with my friends there, Saurav and Ritu. So this is my honor now to start the conversation with my first question. Interestingly, this is going to be a theoretical question, but I'm expecting a practitioner's response from you both. I don't want a theoretical response for this. Okay. The topic for this session is performance coaching for leaders. Now, what exactly you mean by this performance coaching as a concept? We keep hearing multiple types of coachings: life coaching, career coaching, executive coaching, whatnot. So what exactly you understood or what you have encountered as performance coaching? So can I start with Saurav to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Raj. And thank you for also putting the kind of the line that you said. It's primarily from the practice, primarily from what we've been doing so long and what I have seen. I'm going to share that. If you look at the way things look in today's context, every leader is expected to deliver the best of results as far as possible. And the timeline has been getting shorter and shorter over the last decade or so. If earlier people were being evaluated, let's say over a 1 year period, now they're getting evaluated almost every quarter, and sometimes even on a monthly basis. So the challenge for leaders to improve their performance is becoming bigger and stronger. So wherever we have leaders and their desire to get better at their deliveries, their commitments to their organizations, they need to go higher on the performance. And that's where, to my experience, especially in the last 5 years, has been very, very close, where leaders want to learn how to perform better in their respective fields and the respective competencies that they need to demonstrate. And more important, be able to live up to the expectations of their stakeholders. And which is why this has come in very, very big in the recent times. Mm-hmm. In India, we have a very funny story that goes on is the two other areas where people look at performance very closely. One is the student community, where people want to study better and get higher marks, which is again improving performance. The other is the sports community, where there are a lot of sports people who want to do better and better, and it's highly competitive there as well. But primarily, the role that I've been kind of working with are the leaders in the corporate world, and I'll be going more deeper into that as and when we progress. So to me, performance coaching of leaders is primarily going up the ladder in their deliverables, the way they have committed.
Mm-hmm. Going up the ladder towards meeting what is expected of them. I think that's succinct. So Ritu, any different perspective or any other thoughts?
Dr. Raj, I will just concur with what Saurav said. And in addition to what Saurav mentioned, I think one critical application I see of performance coaching is to build self-awareness as well, and also to support individuals to attain goals and help them to maximize their strengths. And it is done in a manner which is more self-directed. So it's more structured, unlike if we look at other kind of coaching, if we talk about life coaching, or even for that matter, coaching which happens at a more, I would say, Longer duration performance coaching may be of shorter duration as well. And it could be something which is very, very structured, competency focused as well. The competencies could be identified by the organization. And that's something could be also the focus as far as the coaching process is concerned. And it could involve not only identifying and clarifying your current goals, but also to take appropriate actions in future to reach those goals. And the end result is obviously enhanced performance.
Wow. I think, putting both of your perspectives together, I just got one line here, which really reads as, performance coaching is a more structured approach over a shorter duration to help leaders perform better and then meet the expectations of their stakeholders, not only for the present, but also keep raising their bar. I think that's something that I could gather from both your perspectives. So from my, if I might just add in a bit, I noticed that when people call in us to coach their leaders, they seem to be meaning performance coaching is, I have already promoted this guy into a leadership role, and knowing very well that this guy is 70% ready. It's a very conscious decision by the organization. Can you help this guy fill in that little gap? Okay, it's not that everybody is perfect in their roles, but I want to help this individual. So it's more like an enabling role that organizations want to perform. So that seems to be one meaning of performance, making the person successful in the current role. And another way that I understood performance coaching is, prepare this guy for the future. I want this guy to grow up in the deliverables and more complexities, etc. So can you help this person perform at the next level? That also seems to be under the gamut of performance coaching. So these are the couple of scenarios that I also experienced similar thing. Now, so having now understood a practitioner's view of performance coaching, not necessarily a theoretical definition of performance coaching by any standards, now I have a sequel coming up, right? So the next question that I have naturally coming up is, where does this get triggered? Who triggers this whole thing? What is it? Where do you find the necessity of performance coaching? Is it something that organizations discover, or is it, have you experienced that leaders reaching out and say, hey, I got a new role, I'm looking for a coach. Can you guys, help me out? What is the trigger?
Okay. I think coaching, or I would say performance coaching, is still at a nascent stage in India. And what I have experienced is that usually organizations initiate the process of coaching. And in some cases, maybe there may be leaders wanting to continue the coaching dialogue. So it could be that the organization initiates it, and we enter the organization, we support the individual. And once the coaching journey, from the organization's point of view, is over, sometimes some maybe coaches or leaders want to continue with the coaching dialogue. So they continue the process later on. But okay, if I were to answer your question, usually performance coaching has been initiated by organization, and that has been my experience so far.
Okay. Saurabh, do you concur with that, or?
Yeah, I agree to it to a large extent. And most of the assignment that we've been getting in the last few years has been through the corporations. The top leaders believe that coaching is essential, especially when you go to the higher levels. They want them to be, taken through this process, primarily on a one-on-one basis, because that builds that little degree of confidence. It tells them what can be done. But what is interesting, if you look at the scenario today, Raj, is we have a tremendous growth of young leaders. Let me clarify my statement. We have a lot of these startups coming up, which means people are giving up their regular jobs and setting up their own businesses. So you have people who are as young as in their early 30s or the mid 30s, who are also the top bosses of the same company. So it's very interesting. Like these people reach out, or the entrepreneurs reach out saying, you know what? I'm the CEO, I'm the MD, I'm only 35 or 38. I would like to be coached, and I want my deputy CEO who's 22 or 28 also to be coached. So, the understanding is the designation may be sounding very nice, but it's also important to see the number of years they put in and what kind of organization. The organization itself may be about a year old, you
Yeah.
know. So that's the other way which is coming in now, big time.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I mean, particularly, I think this startup, that space is really amazing. And if someone got this perspective that while I keep driving my dream of building this business, and it really helped me to have a coach, I think that's a great perspective. I mean, I think kudos to those guys who really think on those lines. In my experience, on a lighter tone, but it's a serious one. It's actually happened to me. Some members of the organization called me and said, why don't you coach my boss?
Yeah, that's true.
It's a very interesting perspective. One CFO recently called and had a very long dialogue with me and said, these are all the kind of things that my guy is doing, the promoter, managing director, he just doesn't listen to us. I think you should really come in and possibly why. I said, you are triggering the need, but that guy is just not even asking me. No, he will not ask, but there is a need. So this is a very interesting thing. He says, why don't you just say hello? He might get an idea that, okay, why don't I call Dr. Raj, kind of a feeling, right? It's a very interesting kind of perspective. So others see the need for coaching in their leaders, but sometimes leaders themselves may not be aware of that. That's an interesting, tricky situation. But kudos to those startup guys in case they realize the need and they actually called in for a coach. So fantastic. But my experience also has been predominantly what Ritu was saying about organizations spotting either for two reasons. One, either the promoted somebody, as I mentioned earlier, so therefore they appoint. The other one I think I see is as a part of the talent management process. That seems to be another huge trigger that I want to identify some of the high potential guys and I want to invest on them and more at a personal kind of a level. And so therefore, why don't you groom these guys? Because they're very, very promising people. I want to groom them for their career with us. So, but in both the cases, it's an organization which triggers. And of course, in some rare cases, we do have some people coming back and say, can I continue at a personal level with you?
Correct.
Even if my organization's assignment is over. I think we feel delighted, not for business, but I think more about the validity of our entire coaching process. Someone's found some value in this process, and therefore they're coming and possibly asking about it, right? So great feeling to have there. Okay,
Raj,
now
just to add on to that point,
sure.
what I've also seen is, let's say there was a senior, and I've seen this happen, a person who was coached in a particular organization, and he moves into a new organization which never had a coaching culture.
Yeah.
So he is the individual who makes a difference. He is the one who invites an opportunity. It takes time for him to get his point accepted.
Right.
But I'm sure I'm sure you have seen that. We met in Bangalore many number of times because our old coaches have moved to newer organizations and have invited us over. So that's the other trigger, I would say, where the transition happens because the person himself believes that this can be done.
Amazing. Absolutely. I think they become the advocates of good practice of coaching. They take it from organization to organization. So that I think is the next and the second question that we sort of deliberated about. What triggers this whole coaching? It could be the organization, it could be the startup guys, or it could be sometimes the people who experience the benefits of coaching and therefore they advocate for other people in their teams as well. Excellent. Now, this possibly is a very, very important question that is coming up is, okay, now you signed up for the coaching. Now, how do we identify what areas to coach? Because I think coaching, if you say, okay, I assigned, here is my, coachee and you are the coach. So yeah, get started. Now what to get started with? How do we define this? I mean, this discovery process. Now, what are the experiences that you have, Saurav?
To me, The first thing obviously is, like you said, this person is on a particular role because he is good enough. But can he improve? Yes, he certainly can. So that's where it all starts. You start assessing as to how good is he on the required competencies of the current role. And some people extend that to saying, okay, if we have to see him as a future leader on the next role and the next, can we also start aligning that path forward? So the starting point is usually the current role with the competencies that has been mapped. And I'm sure Ritu will add to it because she is an expert on assessments, how that gets triggered. But that's the first cut requirement. And as I said in my first point, it's a bigger picture of the organization. There are requirements, there are competencies, there are expectations, and people are being groomed. Today, succession planning is big. So people are actually starting from where they are today in their current role and planning to move ahead in the future line. So it depends from organization to organization how they align this particular journey of a particular coachee or a leader.
So you're saying it's essentially revolving around the expectations of the role expectations. Actually, that's the area to search for. What should be the focus of this particular individual?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Ritu, I mean, he already preempted you, saying you are
Right.
expert in competency. So how do we assess someone's competencies?
So, thank you, Saurabh, for endorsing my skills in assessments. Usually, I think we all begin with an as a status of the competencies, or maybe as a status of an individual's need for, for coaching. So, usually, what we typically do, or I typically do, is I look at obviously what resonates with the client as well as the coachee. So in some cases, it could be just involving having some informal interactions with the key stakeholders of the coachee. In other situations, it could be something which may be prescribed by the organization itself. So they may prescribe a need to do an assessment center or a development center, or even a 360-degree feedback, and that becomes a baseline for doing for starting the coaching journey. So in our experience, large organizations or even mid-sized organizations prefer to have a standardized approach of doing an as-is evaluation of an individual. Now, it could be based on the competency framework which is there of the organization, or it could be even a 360-degree feedback, or even a performance appraisal information or a data available, which can be a good start point when it comes to using as, I would say, a tool for beginning the coaching journey. But personally, I would go with anything which takes the awareness deeper. And sometimes what happens is that the organization may be partial to a particular approach or a process, and we have to use additional tools or techniques to deepen the understanding or to build self-awareness. And that's something that we take up as well when it comes to the coaching journey. So the first session could focus only on that aspect. So so that has been my experience, Dr. Raj. And yeah.
So both of you are saying essentially the point that I'm gathering is it's essentially driven by the organizations, either in terms of there's a competency framework, then there is a development center or a 360-degree feedback, which really tells the leader that, hey, you are here on these competencies. Okay, now here is a coach. So take this report, go to the coach and get started. So that seems to be one approach of, how to identify the focus areas. Now, I just want to understand a little more on this same point. Isn't there isn't there a space for individual to identify one's own areas of development? I mean, is it always the organization processes like a development center or assessment center or 360-degree? I understand, we've seen many places where the development center brings out saying, out of these 10 competencies, you have these things, and these things are a bit of gap. So, don't worry. I know here is your leadership coach. He'll help you, perform this. Or there's a 360-degree feedback, which is supposed to be confidential in many cases, where the individual gets the report. Okay, so this is my 360-degree report. I analyze, I identify, and then I start my engagement with coach, where I say, I heard these things from my stakeholders, and I need your help in trying to sort of sharpen some of these areas of my performance as a leader, right? Other than these structured processes, is there a space for individual to say, very open-ended, I have an ambition to become a much better leader, and I need your help? Is it open-ended, or is it very, very structured and close-ended?
Okay, I've seen both the sides, and the reality is, because coaching, when it starts happening, it obviously becomes a discussion, a dialogue, and one of the interesting concepts we follow here is something known as the chemistry meeting, which is the first meeting between a coach and a coachee to even understand and accept each other. Not that every coachee will accept a coach, or a coach will accept a coachee for whatever reason. And that is an exploratory meeting that takes place where on a very informal setup, many times over a cup of coffee or whatever, and these points get discussed. Now, one of the challenges we have as a coach is, even though we can see a lot of points coming up, I don't think it's wise to get prescriptive, say, hey guy, you need this. We don't do that. At least I don't do that. And nothing comes in there. But there are times when the organization expects certain leaders to be groomed on particular competencies, but we've also seen the leaders themselves, and obviously having that kind of years in a corporate setup or having gone through the experience, they also know what they need. And the third stakeholder is obviously, the teams, and sometimes the teams in a 360 or the other folks might throw up points which may not necessarily be that of the rigid competency framework, but people are keen, and when they express, we do allow that. At least the experience has been that we take it up for discussion. And during a coaching assignment, the other thing is there are some reviews that happen between the coaches and the organization, and that is where these points also come up for discussion.
Okay.
So when a point comes up, it's entirely up to the. Okay, let's look at it this way: who has mandated the coaching assignment? If it's an organization, then they hold the bigger key of saying yes or no. And sometimes they say, okay, we are fine with the coach's request, then we go ahead on that. So it's a very flexible thing to do, in fact. Especially at the senior levels.
So I think just to share my experience, it does start with the organization's structured process. They say, here is the competency data, here is the 360 data. So now, please go ahead and coach these three leaders or whatever it is. That's the broad framework. And I would take that as more of organization's expectations, where this leader is supposed to enhance performance on these competencies. Agreed. And I combine that while dialoguing. I mean, you actually use a very beautiful thing, Saurav, is this chemistry thing, right? So that during that initial one session or maybe second session, we then explore a few other areas that the leader, himself or herself now wants to discuss as well. While we keep the bigger picture of the organizations in the context, but it also gets appended by a little more granular areas of coaching from the individual's dialogue. And I think together we say, okay, now you and me together, we have organization's expectations to meet, but en route, we may also have to focus on several other areas that you may like to focus on. So that is how I think this whole thing, starts off. If we don't do that, in fact, again, I seem to be having a little humor in my coaching experiences, quite a few of them. Some people speak about it, some may not speak. But I had one of those informal chemistry meeting where the guy was just not opening after saying hello to me. I was just nodding. I would say, okay, I'm ready with, you tell me, you teach me kind of thing. I said, no, sorry, this is coaching. This is not a teaching. I mean, I'm not I'm a tuition teacher for you, right? And one coffee was over, and you said, informal. So we actually had in a coffee shop. One coffee was over. I ordered another coffee. Even that was almost getting over. And this guy was just not opening up. And at that moment, I said, let's just look into each other's eyes and then say, I'm not a spy appointed by your human resources department. Okay, please trust me on that. I'm not here to deliver some messages of the organization. I'm not here to really convert you into something else. I'm truly intended to help you in your development journey. As a leader, I want you to perform much, much better. And I have this agreement with your organization that the conversations between you and me, I cannot share with them. This is absolutely a privacy that I'm guaranteeing you. I have signed this as a, even if they ask me, I'm not going to say it because that's my coaching commitment to you. The moment I actually started, belling the cat, then this guy was at ease. And you remember, without coffee, we spent another 45 minutes. Without coffee, we spent another 45 minutes. That was one coaching that I remember. It continued on that note, but it really, really went across 18 months of engagement with that person, right? So it all started as if someone mandated, and you're going to teach me kind of a thing too. Oh, this is a process for my development. Now let me open up and start owning the entire process. So that's the reason why I was dwelling on this point, saying if someone brings as if it's a prescribed syllabus into the coaching, I think people seem to be fairly closed. You say, while the framework of expectations are okay, but I'm here to really discuss whatever you want to discuss. And that's been my approach, and I'm glad that I think you also share. It's a combination.
Correct. Also, Dr. Raj, I think I completely endorse what you've said. And I think as a coaching as a process to be helpful or effective, it should be directly tied to what the client wants to accomplish, not what the organization wants to accomplish. And through that process, I think, and it also needs to be directed by the coachee, where the coachee is empowered to uncover and develop his own path to achieving his goal. So I think that requires a lot of trust building. That's something which you, I think, established. And as we say in ISC masteries, I think mastery number 1 is extremely critical to demonstrate in the first session. And what also helps is expressing the, also the intent of doing this, as well as a lot of incisive questioning as a coach to explore the thoughts, the feelings, the values, and maybe some self-limiting beliefs or the other obstacles that may be holding that person back. So that requires us to probably be involved in more engaged listening, and I think that's another mastery that we have in IAC masteries, that we need to hear more from them and not go with an agenda which is provided by the organization. And something that we have to strike a balance, especially when it comes to performance coaching, is that how do we balance the how to, and how do you achieve those goals with what is stopping them, or what is the invisible stuff, what is something which is inhibiting their progress, or what is it that is going on with them, becomes very, very crucial in this coaching journey. And especially when it comes to performance coaching.
Great. So far, I think just to summarize a quick pause in the process of our discussion, we started saying what exactly we understand as performance coaching in practice, and then we talked about who triggers this whole requirement for performance coaching, and then how do we identify the areas for performance coaching. Now, Ritu, please feel free to sort of bring in any points, any questions in case anyone has mentioned anything in the chat.
Right. So there's
we
one
must not
question.
ignore that.
Yeah. So there's one question from Tengo who says, coaching is about the client's agenda. In your experience in performance coaching, where actually do these leaders themselves want to go or expect from you as a coach?
Yeah. So you want to take that, Saurav? You want to respond? Any thoughts?
I mean, we kind of touched upon it in a different way. We said yes.
Yeah.
Ritu very nicely shared that thought about it being the coach's agenda. And you asked me this question, how do you really differentiate between the agenda set by the organization or the person's story himself or herself?
Yeah.
The important part here is, okay, if the leaders are very clear where they want to go, fine. But if they expect us, and many occasions it does happen, they expect a prescription from us, which I don't think is a not so great habit to cultivate. So if they expect us as a coach to coach them, guide them, and invite them to look at their own potential, how they can grow up through a question or a engaging discussion, I would be happy to do that. But very often what happens, people want a prescription. They come as boldly to say or ask, what should I do? Can you tell me 3 things what I should do? And that's where my coaching abilities get tested a lot.
Yeah.
So it's for me to rephrase the question, reframe it, and get them to talk a little more. Perhaps there is a hidden need there. There is something else which is coming out, and to me, those are excellent opportunities to practice engaged listening. Which Ritu talked about, to see where is this person coming from, and there is a tool which I use quite often, and that helps. So to answer Tunku's question, if they expect something from me, there is no direct prescription. But if they expect a discussion and things evolve, yes, a lot can come out of it.
In that, for the coach, it becomes even a bigger challenge if you understand that problem and possibly you tried one solution in the past. And that becomes even more tempting. My God, it's almost coming on my lips to tell you exactly what to do. I did it. I did it this way now, but coaching says no, don't prescribe. Stay back, hold yourself back, and then make the person think and explore the options. That's a real difficult kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but of course, people do expect these little quick fixes because of a variety of reasons. One is there's a pressure to perform back, right? After this session, give me 3 ideas, I'll try it out and then come back in 15 days and tell you how it worked.
Correct.
That seems much better kind of a temptation. So you still, those are the little difficult areas. Just to add to the response to Tunku's point, I think organizations are investing in their leaders and they have a particular purpose why they initiated coaching as a process. So I think both coach as well as the leader are somewhere accountable back to the organization. Because the organization hasn't started this for nothing. So they do have a purpose. But having said this, let them not exactly prescribe what should be the content of the coaching process. Let the coaching, the content be owned by the leader. While the end objective of the coaching, I think we both really together are answerable to the organization.
I agree.
I think I would put it this way that ultimately, are you ready to play the expectations that the organization is having on you? That is where we need to. But the granularity of your requirements, I think let's customize as per your requirements. I think that combination is possibly much better. Great.
Absolutely.
Now let's. Any other points?
I think one question we need to ask as. Or maybe the coachee needs to ask is, am I ready to be coached? Because the whole journey would involve, as Saurav rightly said, it's not going to be prescriptive. I think it would involve some tolerance for discomfort. You have to ask tough questions from yourself. You need to be open to experimentation. Also, one has to have a lot of self-discipline. I think all of us can it would resonate with us that the fact that many a times the coachees are not able to make adequate progress because they are not making effort to try certain things which has been agreed in the coaching session. So those are some of the things that we also have to navigate as coaches as well. And especially these are challenges which we come across, especially when the coaching is something which has been mandated from the organization. So how much commitment is something which is being demonstrated by the coachee has to be established and has to be clarified right in the beginning.
Sure.
That's, yeah.
Any other questions? Any other points that we respond from the chat? Anything
okay,
else?
so there is a question here. How do you negotiate with organizations on the confidentiality issue to get them to respect to that?
And I will quickly jump in there. I mean, this is absolutely a non-negotiable kind of thing when I sign up with any organization. This is part of my proposal itself. There's a big paragraph that I focus on this. That organization, I'm accountable to the organization to give you update about how is it going, how serious this person is, and how much progress we are making. But these are all very high level kind of pointers, and I'm accountable because you're paying me or as a paid coach or whatever. And the same is the case with the leader. I mean, leader also has to go back and report, saying, okay, this is how I'm progressing. But what exactly is being discussed? What are the deficiencies or the areas of concern or dilemmas or whatever it is? Absolutely confidential. In fact, I mean, the moment I make it upfront so clear, I don't think I'm lucky. So far, no client has ever asked me to share or divulge the actual content of our coaching discussions. So far, nothing. They just say, how is it going, etc. And in fact, there are some leaders who ask me, is it okay if I go to my boss and then share, how things are going? I mean, are you okay with that? I said, if you wish to do that, all by me. I mean, you can just go and then share as per your requirement. You want to say, wow, I actually cracked this, thanks to my coach, and I want to really take up a higher responsibility. You want to discuss, by all means, please go ahead. But nothing will come from me to the organization. This is non-negotiable as a coach.
Right. So there's another question, interesting question from Kavita, who says the challenge is when we coach the leader out of the organization, because that is the possibilities that open through our coaching. So what's our perspective on it is what she's asking. When we coach someone from outside the organization, like maybe it is not being mandated by the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the perspectives that we come across in that situation? What are the possibilities that open up through our coaching in that scenario?
Yeah, you're about to go, Saurav.
Okay, what I'm if I've understood the question correctly, it's talking about a coach or a leader being coached outside the perspective of the organization, and then that's what I hear you, Ritu, say. That it is not mandated by the organization, but or maybe it has been, but there is a different thing. When we do this coaching, and I've seen this very often, people need to be very clear on what are when somebody has to really think of how this can be done and what are the real needs of the coachee, right? So the coachee may be somebody who has various other things on the mind, which we need to understand. I'll just share a quick step-by-step process, which I do. I'll just share it very quickly, is what I do. Because very many times we have seen, and this also happens from the organization's perspective or the leader's self-perspective or anybody for that matter, that I'll just quickly share if this is visible to all of you. Is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what we do is, I go with a very open mind and open set, but the point is when people state whatever their problem, it is not usually the real problem. The stated problem or the problem a person states, I want to improve my performance or I want to improve something which I do to manage my team may not be the real one. It could be, one has to really, really engage in a lot of listening to understand what it means. And very often when I have explored this, and thanks to some of the engagements that happens in the first 1 or 2 meetings and purely listening patiently, one may uncover that the real needs could be very different. It probably could be a fear that the person has in terms of being, being sacked, or the person has a fear of not being able to challenge authority, or a fear that the team members are not really living up to it. So the real stated problem that an organization might give me as a coach or an individual coachee could be very different from the actual problem. And that's where very often in my initial years, I had this mistake when the end result was not very highly appreciated. So it's very important for us as coaches to understand what the actual problem is and where is it. And this is where the discussion becomes very critical. So listening, understanding, asking question is what I do. Once we do that, then we ask certain questions about the underlying factors. Is it a mindset? Is it something the person do it? And this comes out very often, where it could be just an insecurity that is worrying the person. So in terms of understanding what this person has, is there a doubt or confusion? Is there a mandate that is worried about? So trying to understand the intention of the coachee or the confusion is what I need always pay attention to. And what I've also seen is I also do a reality check, which we just talked about. Would Ritu mentioned, would the coachee really be willing to do something himself or herself? Is the person himself willing to be coached and do take up some actions beyond that? If that happens, phenomenal. If that doesn't happen, then there is something more to be done in terms of the engagement. And that's where it's very critical for the leader to know what's happening. Then comes what I call the possibilities, which is basically mastery number 8 that we talk about in ISC. What are the available options? And this is highly exploratory. It may take 2 or 3 sessions to get there. But once the people form up what they're doing, they're very, very clear. It's my job as a coach then to, help them create that kind of a supportive system or see what that can be done. And this is something which I've learned over experience. When I was doing my masteries, it really helped me. And the good news is I remember it very easily. This model, it helps me because it's something which is about me and my name. So I can take the credit for this. But it really, really works. It really works. And I've seen that, And my biggest breakthrough that happens is the first to the second step. When somebody might say, you know what, I want to be a better leader, but actually he's trying to say, I want to get out of this company. It could be as interesting as that. So this is where it really makes sense to understand what people do.
Right.
So are we allowed to use Saurav model of coaching whenever we do in future? So with the due credits to Saurav.
I will ask you, what is your stated need?
Okay,
and what is your actual need?
Sort of interestingly, Kavita meant was that what if during the coaching process, the person decides to resign because maybe, you also mentioned that maybe, maybe that could be one of the outcomes of the coaching session, or maybe as a stated need which may emerge, right? So that's what her question is, that if the coaching has been mandated by the organization, and during that coaching journey, what if the person chooses to resign? Dr. Raj, would you like
to take it up?
Yeah.
I mean, two things happen. One is if it was mandated by the organization, and if it's just halfway through, and if the person chooses to switch the organization, it gets terminated. I mean, it's over. It's over. I mean, the HR possibly might just inform you, or sometimes it happened only once it happened to me, that the person sounds me out. I'm not telling anyone, and you're the first person to know about it. Tomorrow I'm putting down my papers. So you get to know about that a little before. And so the whole point is, okay, now it's getting over. Okay, so hopefully I think in my next organization, I might again, try to get in touch with you, etc. So that's over. But in a very few rare cases, the person says, though I'm leaving this organization, I want to continue at a personal level. Are you open? Are you open to do this? I think if that happens, I mean, the dilemma for the coach is, should I inform the organization, or should I just take it up at a personal level myself? I think that's a huge dilemma. I mean, there's no definitive answer. But once it happened, I did inform the organization. I say, I understand that this leader is leaving, but this person wants to continue the coaching session, at his own, whatever, initiative. and I'm just keeping you informed about it. I mean, organization was fairly indifferent about it. They say, see, once he leaves, okay, he can do whatever he wants. And that's how they said. That was the kind of a response that I had. Yeah, so I think we are actually having just about 10 more minutes. Now, I think we've covered good ground, but I also don't want to miss the opportunity of speaking about certain practical challenges that we live with as coaches. You see, we can talk very professionally that this is the way to do coaching, that organizations might trigger it. These are the focus areas, this is the confidentiality, blah, blah, blah. Excellent. I mean, this is, if everything goes well, I think this is the best way to do coaching. Now, but when you execute coaching initiatives, have you experienced any specific challenges? Briefly, we just have last 10 minutes. Very briefly, Ritu, you want to go? Any quick challenges?
I think if I were to connect with what's going on with, in last, I would say 8-9 months or 1 year, the pandemic has been an amplifier for good, better or worse. So, what has happened is that if the coachee has been fixed on certain issues, it just amplified even more given the pandemic situation. And so sometimes these things, or maybe what is going on with the coachee at a given point of time, can also become a derailer when it comes to the whole coaching process. Like if I just want to give an example about the pandemic, I was coaching quite a few people during the pandemic when we had lockdown in India. And what we realized was that the sessions were more focused on the immediate issues, and like in one individual's case, he was responsible for close to 100,000 laborers working in different project sites across 4 states in India. And his biggest challenge was that how should he as an individual or someone who was responsible for so many laborers take care of their basic housing and basic needs. So he was so consumed by it. Obviously, this was something which was creating a lot of stress and anxiety as well. So we rely. So these are some of the issues which sometimes, something which is more immediate, something which becomes more maybe a crisis situation.
Yeah.
Or maybe something a person is going through personally. Like in recent times, we are also hearing some of our coaches, either their family members or maybe they themselves, contracted COVID, and each one of them are dealing with that scenario very differently. So obviously, when we talk about the performance coaching sessions, we are probably not able to focus so much on those goals which has been set. Our focus becomes something which is maybe much more deeper, where we connect at a more human level,
Exactly. I can just relate to that, Ritu, what you just said. When someone has been going through either a personal crisis or a professional crisis, very recently, what I did was it was scheduled session, so the person felt obligated to join the session. But first couple of minutes, I got to know about this. That I very openly I said, I think you just need to focus on those aspects. I think performance coaching, let's just wait. It's perfectly fine. I will reschedule this and I will reshuffle my schedules. No issues, and don't feel any sense of guilt at all. And I'm actually with you. Please take care. And after that, a couple of messages that I exchanged with this individual saying, how is your things at home, etc. Next session when I connected, he was so happy that you have so much of empathy. You understood my kind of problem. That gesture itself gave me a lot of confidence that you're not business-like and you're not just pushing me towards my performance as such, right? that bonding that I started tasting with this individual was far different than before. I mean, just strengthened. I think just the demonstration of empathy at the right time during these pandemics, during this chaos, I think makes a huge difference, positive difference to the coach-coachee relationship. I mean, you just need, you just can't be like business-like in those kind of moments.
True.
Yeah. So anything else out of?
Yeah, just to put it in 3 quick sentences, to me, the challenges have been, and if I were to put it in 3 buckets, the first has been, like I was just mentioning a couple of minutes ago, that's what I have worked a lot on, is what is the intention? What is it that you would like to achieve out of this assignment, whether it's an organization or an individual? The first part. The second part is, I will jump straight away the end part. A lot of times people expect something magical to happen. Just because the person has gone through a coaching process, they suddenly believe that they are the biggest transformed people, or they would expect somebody to be transformed, which not necessarily be true. The third challenge I see is in the middle path between the first and the end is either people are a little skeptical about the whole process, saying, are you really serious? Do you think this is going to really change a person or me or whatever? Or they're over reliant. I've seen sometimes people come to the point where, like I said, they either start asking for prescriptions, or they believe, okay, here is a person who's like, the biggest thing that could have ever happened to me to change my life. So it's a tough boundary from all directions.
So high expectations, high dependency, high expectations, high dependency, and yeah. So those are the kind of challenges. For me, one of the very tricky challenge was when neither the organization nor the leader were convinced about coaching, but they heard this to be a good practice to have, so they just started, and no one had any deeper understanding of this whole thing at all. And when you tell them, they may not even get it. So it's just one more checkbox item. Okay, everyone is doing coaching, so let's also launch. And so as a part of it, I need to identify some 12 leaders. So you're one of them. Get started. And there's no purpose, there's no vision, there's nothing for this coaching as an initiative itself. In such cases, you find it very hard to really, the entire onus seems to be on the coach to say, prove me that coaching is good. And that is a big pressure to really say, as if you are back to the wall and you're trying to satisfy with some success stories from your side. I mean, in such cases, we talk about coaches' readiness, but I also talk about organizations' readiness for coaching.
Absolutely.
I think both are very, very important kind of elements that I noticed. When I sensed this by the second session, there was one organization where I politely excused myself from that entire coaching engagement itself. I say, maybe a little later we can again reconnect, but for now, I think you have other priorities. So why don't you focus on that? Very politely, I had to sort of excuse myself. And the second one I noticed was earlier, about 6, 7, 8 years ago, the moment you identified someone as a coach, the people walked into the discussion room saying, I must be having some problem, and therefore I think my HR has identified me as for coaching. So tell me, what are my problems? 2, now saying they are feeling that they're privileged, that they have been identified for leadership coaching. That's a huge change of acceptability that I noticed over the years. So it used to be a challenge earlier, but now I think it's a pleasure. So many organizations, the readiness for coaching as a concept, I think is really, really on the rise. Right. So I think, Louis, we have just another minute to conclude in the 1 hour slot. So I would request Saurav, exactly in 60 seconds, can you please summarize?
Well, that's a tough expectation you have from me, Raj, and I think we've covered the points about performance coaching in organizations, the expectation organization leaders have from their coaches or the leaders to be coached. We talked about the assessments, we talked about the starting point, we talked about even the conflicts that the coach or the organization might have between them. We also shared about what could be the real intention behind what could be the intended desires of the company, and of course the challenges that we just talked about. So a phenomenal journey. I mean, there are so many other things that we could have talked, but this is too short a time. Thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you for your patient listening. And what a wonderful, wonderful evening that we've had. Thank you
Saurav, I
from
think that
our
was brilliant.
yeah.
You just finished in 30 seconds. Marvelous. That was amazing. 30 seconds, you wrapped it up. Fantastic. So
I've
thank
been
you so
coached well
much,
by Raj.
IAC. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you
you,
so
Louis.
much.
Thank you, Anjali, who possibly could not make it today. But a real sincere thanks. Very rare to get this kind of a fantastic forum to share our experiences. As you noticed, we kept this entire session more as an experiential sharing, coming live from our own practice of coaching than keeping it theoretical. So I hope you pardon us in case we didn't sound too theoretical about it. So thank you very much once again, and back to Louis.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much, Ritu, Dr. Raj, Surav. And to tell you the truth, we needed this conversation. We needed this conversation. We always take, I mean, in some instances in groups, we take for granted that coaching is a one-to-one experience coming from the individual as a motivation. I want to improve, but the reality is that coaching in the corporate arena is a whole different beast where we have to be accountable not only to the corporation, the sponsors, but the coachee themselves. And I've seen all kinds of nice strategies and views that enrich my personal practice. I really thank you all so much for being here. I will go back to our own Shanmurthy to say final words and say goodbye. And after that, I ask for the big fraternal hug.
Thank you, Dr. Raj, Saurav, and Ritu. Really enlightening session, and I think that most of the participants here, were looking forward to get some answers. Me myself, I was, looking at your experience, and we could see that it is very similar any part of the world. And I'm just happy to actually listen to your experiences, which clearly demonstrated the IAC masteries, the magical masteries in action, and a wonderful sharing. Thank you so much. And Louis, let's hug each other.
All right, just let's just open those mics and make a noise of joy, of applauding. Say, hey, woo! Just a big fraternal hug, everyone. Thank you for joining us, everyone here. We love you all, and let's keep up with the fraternity, the learning, and building a new world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
day, good evening, good night.
Bye bye.
Great
Thank
session.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.